YouTube, welcome to Groove Builders. I'm Disorderly Cone, and in this episode, we're going to be building Big Ben from London, England, and adding him into our developing skyline. Let's get down to the workbench to take a look at the package.
Groove Builders, welcome to the workbench. We have our Metal Earth Big Ben kit in classic Metal Earth packaging. This finished model looks great, and I really like the look of the detail around the clocks. Let's see if our model turns out the same. On the back, we have a blurb about Big Ben and its place in history and our world. A little bit further down, we see a diagram showing us how to use our insertion holes, tabs, and fold lines. Next door, we have a diagram showing us how to bend and twist the tabs for this model. Lastly, we have a QWERTY code down here that we can scan to see a 360 view of the model. This can be helpful to see how things are connected. Alrighty, Groove Builders, let's open her up. We have our instructions and our metal. Look at this sheet. It looks so nice and super shiny. I mean, look at that. Swing, swing. Let's take a look at the instructions. I'm getting a little distracted by the shiny metal. The first thing we're going to see here is our Metal Earth logo, followed by the 360 QWERTY code on the right. Then we have the diagram showing us how to use the tabs, fold lines, and insertion holes. For some suggested tools, I definitely recommend tweezers, pliers, and cutters. Further on down, we have our legend with some circles. We need to fold our tabs 90 degrees when we see them, and triangles we need to pull and twist our tabs. It's also important that we follow this part diagram and keep our parts in place till we need them. The first thing we need to do is orientate the metal sheet to match this picture. This will make finding parts very easy. Alright, Groove Builders, let's get to building. We will need parts 1 and 2. A quick note for our builders out there, when it comes to buildings such as this, it's really nice to have a good mandrel set. It will make these squares and rigid pieces very easy to form. I'll be using the square attachment along with my pliers and tweezers for this build. Let's start our build off by bending part 2 over our mandrel and getting nice consistent bends, forming a square. Don't lock it up just yet. Part 1 is formed by bending the piece along the fold lines until we have a consistent pyramid shape. Now we can go ahead and start bending the tabs along the borders down 90 degrees. It's important to make sure that these are nice and flat as they will be going into part 2's insertion holes. Now we have to play the wrap game. This can be a little bit difficult. Work the tabs into the insertion holes along part 2. If you need to, you can secure them as you go to prevent them from popping out. When ready, lock the tabs in place to secure the two pieces together. Now we can go ahead and cut out part 3, which from the detail looks like the lower roof of the clock tower. All we need to do is line up the border pieces and ensure that there are no gaps. Now we can insert part 2 into part 3, making sure to twist the tabs for our secure connection. Just like before, we bend our tabs along the bottom out 90 degrees. Alright, Groove Builders, it's time to grab part 4 and attach it to the structure. This is formed and attached the same way part 2 was attached to part 1. Take your time and work in the tabs. You know, it's funny that the packaging says Big Ben because that's actually not the name of the structure. The structure's name is the Elizabeth Tower, but even that was a very recent title in 2012 after the Queen's Jubilee. Big Ben refers to the bell with inside the clock tower. I think it's funny how names can kind of be transferred over time. Part 5 is a plate that we can secure to the tower with 4 spots. Make sure to secure the tabs with a tight twist. It's time to build our clocks! Part 6 will hold all 4 pieces from Part 7. The best way I found to do this step was to pre-bend all of the fold lines along the inside of Part 6 90 degrees. Then, one by one, double checking the clock faces and facing them right way, I attach them with a firm twist. This is the main focal point of the model, so make sure you go slowly to not scratch any of the detail. Big Ben rang for the first time on July 11, 1859, but it didn't last very long. In September, a crack stopped the bell ringing for 4 years. It has since been down on a few other occasions, for 7 weeks in 2007, and before that 9 months for repairs in 1976. So, how did Big Ben come about? On the 16th of October 1834, the Palace of Westminster was up in flames. A huge fire. Londoners came from all over to watch the blaze. There were so many spectators, they actually stopped the firemen's efforts to extinguish the flames. When the flames finally did go out, there wasn't much left. Only Westminster Hall, really. Parliament had nowhere to meet, and they had to cancel all of their sessions. Once all the faces are attached, we can bend Part 6 into a cube shape. This part may not stay closed, but that's okay. We'll be attaching it shortly. So, in November of 1835, 13 months later, they set up a committee to rebuild, and they held a competition for different designs. Now let's grab Part 8 and 9. Starting with 9, take our tweezers and line up all the edges with the fold lines. Slowly start to form the rectangle of the tower. More than 400 designs were submitted, and in the end, the committee chose the design of Charles Barry, but it wasn't the Elizabeth Tower we know today. His original design did not include the clock tower. They asked him to revise it, and in the end, the clock tower was added. When you have a sharp rectangle formed, grab the plate of Part 8 and attach it to the top of Part 9 with 4 twists. I made sure to slightly bend these tabs so they didn't interfere with the future steps coming up. George Airy was a clock hobbyist who worked on the clock and its internals. He was quoted saying, "The great clock should be so accurate that the first strike for each hour shall be accurate within 1 second of time." And it was. Now with all 3 parts in hand, it's time to start connecting them. Let's grab our roof and our clock faces. Insert the tabs into the insertion holes, being very careful not to scratch the metal. Bend the tabs down and ensure they are flush with the border. Now we can attach the lower half of the tower, being very careful to insert the tabs into the insertion holes in front of the clock. Then the tabs flush with the border. Finally, take Part 10, which is the stand, and connect it to the base. Take a minute to find the best side of the clock tower and make it the front. The front part of the stand has the writing Big Ben on it. Secure the tabs with a nice pull and twist, then fold the 4 sides down 90 degrees, matching the corners for no gaps.
Alright Groove Builders, we did it. We built ourselves the iconic clock tower Big Ben. Let's go ahead and begin with construction difficulty. I found this model to be pretty straightforward, with only a few little tricky parts that you might accidentally scratch the metal with. Of course, I'm talking about the clock pieces that go along the center of Big Ben. If you aren't careful while installing the faces of the clock onto Big Ben, you do run the risk of scratching the fine detail that's been etched on the front. Just go slow and make sure you pre-bend all of those tabs. Don't forget, you can also check to make sure those tabs are properly lined up. Just make sure that when you're doing this, you're taking the time not to scratch the metal. Another part that can be a little bit tricky is attaching any of the border pieces to these square parts. My recommendation is to go ahead and bend the borders. That way, when you're installing them around the square and you're inserting the tabs, it makes it a little bit easier for you to get those tabs into the insertion holes. After inserting the tabs into the insertion holes, you can lock them into place as well to help you get around the entire square. However, this can also make it very difficult for the last tab to get in properly. My suggestion, again, is just to go slow and don't get frustrated with a piece. If you do, put it down and come back to it. You don't want to accidentally break the tab or, even worse, bend the metal in a way that it cannot be rebent. Now, let's go ahead and talk about build time. This particular model didn't take very long, only about 40 minutes. However, I do think that other groove builders out there with some good experience can definitely get this model built faster. I have to fool around with my camera, which only films about 15 minutes worth of video per time. So that always adds a lot of time to me building these models. And finally, groove builders, my thoughts. Big Ben is a fantastic model for beginners, not only because of its fantastic etching and detail that they included on the model, but also because of its ease of construction. With very few obstacles for you to overcome, this model is definitely something I would recommend within your first 2 to 3 models in building. It also requires the least amount of tools, with me using my mandrel really only about once or twice. And if I didn't have my mandrel, I'm sure I would have been fine with just a pair of tweezers. Make sure that you also have a pair of cutters, as if you are starting out new, those are an essential tool for you to have. And with that, groove builders, that brings us to the end. I had a great time building Big Ben with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to hit that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool content coming out soon. Until next time, groove builders, keep building!